Hey, everybody. Welcome to the FNG podcast. This is episode 5. Thanks for joining us today. We are talking about finding your author's voice and what that looks like and all the different aspects of that. So exciting stuff today. And we're going to cover a whole bunch of stuff that I think will be very good for a new author.
Hello, everybody. So, Brent, seeing that you introduced us, I'll ask you the first question. You came from a very different and deliberate direction into writing. How about you share with us your story?
Yeah. So we had talked a little bit earlier this week, the three of us, and Gary, you had mentioned that this was a therapeutic thing for you and something that you kind of got into because you wanted to really kind of work yourself through some PTSD and some things like that. I think all three of us have some degree of PTSD from previous jobs and all the rest of it. And I guess where I came from was I knew I wanted to write, and I knew that I wanted to be maybe not a best-selling author. I mean, that's always in the back of your mind, but I knew I wanted to work my way through my writing journey. And the prospect of getting picked up by, one of the big three, the big five publishers is dismally thin, right? It's just not going to happen. So that took me down the path of, well, what does being an indie author look like? And so, when you come from either a military service or paramilitary service, they walk you through the basics first, and then you get more advanced skills, and you kind of work your way through, until you're able to, to operate at a certain level. And so I looked at writing the same way. I came from a place where I thought, well, what do I need to do to actually make myself successful and get me to a point where, I can do this? And at the time, still had kids at home, still had, there wasn't a lot. I couldn't just throw $10,000 at becoming an author and making that happen. So I said, how do I make that happen? So for me, I was able to attend 20 books to 50K back in, what was that, 2018, 19, something like that, kind of like right at the beginning of COVID. And, it was still this weird, like people wearing masks and not wearing masks and, all the crazy stuff that went on in the casinos.
Can you what is 20 books to 50K?
Yeah. So 20 books to 50K was, it was an author's conference that Craig Martell put on. Craig Martell, I forget who the other guy that they're partners with that. And it was like 3,500 people. Like, it was a huge authors conference and really focused around independent authors who were doing the indie author thing through Amazon, through KDP, through Ingram Spark. And it was kind of an all-in-one take you from, there was so many different tracks, and it was everything from marketing to actually how to write to all of these different pieces that you needed as a new author, right? And it was like 5 days. Like, it was this intensive kind of boot camp thing if you wanted to make it that. And so I tried to kind of pick all these different pieces out that I was going to need, basically taking all these little small classes to figure out what I was going to need to be an independent author. And so I covered some marketing stuff. I covered some, Alexander Drake, is that the guy's name? Did a great series on basically theme and plot. So I tried to pull all of these things in, and then I went back and I figured, okay, how do I do this? How do I actually figure out the system that Amazon is, or that Ingram Spark is? So ultimately, my goal was to write science fiction. That's what I wanted to do. But I knew that I can. At the time, we had the fire department I was with. We'd had a couple guys that had been flushed out of our system from not even really like the actual job of being a firefighter. But when you're a firefighter, you work a 24-hour shift. So you live with these people a third of your life. And so there's just times where people don't fit that mold. They just don't get all the little, all the unspoken stuff that happens, or all the unspoken expectations they don't get. And so I thought it's pretty unfair for us to run these guys through all this. They're here for 9 months, and then we flush them because they can't figure out how to make coffee in the morning and how to, talk to their officers or whatever. So I wrote a book for that, right? So I walked that KDP line I started off, I'm like, well, how do I use KDP? I have no idea how to use KDP. I didn't want to put my book out there and then have KDP be something that I flopped because I couldn't figure out which buttons to push on the screen.
Hey, Brent, just go into what KDP actually is too, though. Like
Yeah,
acronyms are great, but some people, hopefully some people are listening for us. And if they are, stuff like that may escape them. So
absolutely. And yeah, thanks for catching that because I'm good at throwing acronyms out and not explaining them. So KDP is
that's
Kindle
the good
Direct
thing about
Publishing.
TLAs.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Kindle Direct Publishing. So it's Kindle's it's Amazon's side of self-publishing. So with KDP, and it's an archaic, terrible website that is not set up well, and it's kind of a like it's esoteric to a point where like if you don't know all the little fiddly bits to do the right way, you're not going to come out with a good product. So I spent some time there trying to figure out, well, how do I do this properly, right? And with a 20 bucks to 50K behind me and some videos and some help from different people, I uploaded a firefighter's journal, right? So you guys know you go on terrible stuff. You see terrible stuff, and sometimes it's good to document that and be like, September 17th of 2021, I had this call. It was, I was exposed to these chemicals. I did this thing, whatever. So I thought, what a great way to low content. I don't have a lot of stuff to put in this. It's 80 pages or whatever it was of just basically lines. And hey, were you exposed to chemicals? Were you exposed to, mental health issues? Do you have, what happened on this call during this day? And so that was a quick and easy thing for me to upload and get kind of familiar with the KDP, not algorithm, system. And I didn't expect that to sell. I mean, it wasn't, it was, if I made $0 on that, it was a learning experience for me. Right. Lo and behold, I sold, I'd sell like 5 a month or 10 a month. And it'd be like, I made $10 this month. I am raking in the dough. Right. But it got me to a point where I understood the KDP system a little bit. And I was able to go through and figure out, okay, now when I do upload my first book, I understand how to properly format a cover and how to properly format the interior of the book and to do these different things. So that led me to the next thing, which was I wrote a book called Captain Salty's Book of Fire Service Wisdom. And that book is basically the book that I wanted to write for probies. It was like, hey, probie, here's the 25 rules that no one is ever going to tell you. No one is ever going to give you the explanation as to why we do these things. But these are expectations that we have in the fire service that either you get these or you don't, and we flush you, right? So it was that kind of probing manual of what to do when nobody tells you what to do, and that sold really well. It does well enough for I was able to attend 20 books for the next couple of years, and my take my family with me. It wasn't like pay off your house money, but it was I could at least go on a short little vacation with my family, right? So. And that's been a kind of a consistent seller. I'm always in like probably the top. I think I just checked it the other day and I was like down around 117, but I'll bump up to like number 10 or 20 in that vocational, whatever the categories that I'm in. I'm typically within the top, 20, 30, 40, 50 books in that category. And so that allowed me to figure out, okay, well, now I know how to format a book properly. I know how to make a cover properly. I know how to do these things that as you're walking that indie author path that you have to figure out. And so it was kind of the baby steps thing for me to kind of like walk down that path and figure out, okay, I know how to do this. 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 And it finally got me to a position where I was able to like really start thinking about what's it look like to actually write the science fiction that I ultimately want to write. And so all of those things kind of converged with me retiring from the fire service and having some extra time on my hands and really kind of being able to dedicate some more time and effort into actually writing sci-fi. And so that's really where I kind of ended up. And my complete idea was to just self-publish and to make sure that I could do that well. I had no intentions of ever sending a manuscript to anyone because number one, I was scared of it, right? I mean, you always hear about authors that are like, well, I have this pile this thick of rejection letters that I got from all the terrible things that happened, and I personally, I didn't know if I could handle that. I was like, I don't know that I want to be a part of that system. The more authors I got to know, the more I kind of realized that there was a little bit of, I don't want to call it nepotism, but I mean, like if you're in the circle, you're in the circle and like, you kind of know. And so sometimes like going to those 20 books or some of those conferences where you meet some people, it's very helpful to kind of have them in your back pocket because you can talk to them and you can figure that out, right? So it still didn't take away any of that and that fear of me submitting anything, right? So I don't know, I was maybe 10 chapters into book one of the series that I wanted to write with Outland Stars, and part of the Writer Dojo, which is Larry Correia and Steve Diamond. They do a podcast for writing, and exceptional podcast. It's really good. If you want to go back and like listen to that, they kind of cover everything. I mean, they do a really good job of walking you down the path of independent writing and some of that. And they have a Facebook
But
group,
not as
so
good as this group.
not as
Not
good as this. No,
almost
this
good.
is way higher quality than those guys ever put out.
Yeah, we're highbrow here.
We are highbrow. They put out on there. Athon came on, and Athon is one of those book publishers that they are not the Simon and Schuster or the Penn Publishing or the whatever, but they are the publisher, right? Like they are the leader of kind of the small press, if that's what you want to call them. I wouldn't call them small press. They've got some major stuff, but they are kind of leading the way in non-traditional publishing, right? The not based out of New York, not a bunch of kind of angry young wine moms that are in the editorial space. So they put out a call and said, "Hey, we're looking for projects. If you have something that fits science fiction, military science fiction, whatever, we would love to hear from you." And my wife says, "Well, you should submit to them." And I'm like, not a chance. Like that's not going to happen, right? Like, I mean, maybe with another press, maybe with somebody else, I might have a shot. But like this is Athon, I'm not even gonna bother putting it in or whatever. I knew a couple of the guys from Athon, I just in passing, I'd met a couple of them at different conferences and talked with them and stuff. So, and they were just great guys and really super helpful when it came to stuff. And I thought, you know what, I can probably take rejection from somebody that I know better than somebody that I don't know, because at least I can put a face to who sent me the rejection letter. So yeah, so I sent in I don't know, it's a couple of chapters and just basically a letter that said, "Hey, I am trying to write to market and trying to write a good story that will play well with the public, that your readership will want to read. And so here it is. Here's my idea. Here's what I got going on." And I pitched him a couple of chapters, and it was like that. Like within 24 hours, I got a thing back that said, "Hey, we'll take it. Yeah, we'd love to do that." And I'm reading this email, and I'm like, "This is not real. Like this is somebody spoofing me. This is 100% not a real thing." And it took me a little while to send a message back, like, "You guys sure about this? This is is this really what?" And they were like, "Yeah, absolutely. This is what we want to do." And do you have 3 books? Was the question. Like how big is this series? Where can we go with this? And I have the series outlined to like 12 books, right? So like we can go 12 books in the series. And those are the kind of things that I think they're looking for, right? They want to see that somebody is serious about putting out a decent product. At the end of the day, they are, they're in business to make money, and they want to have good products to do that. And so I guess to go back to the original question, my process was probably different than your guys' process. But my process was, I want to learn all of these steps along the way so I can actually output a really good product that somebody is going to want to pick up and buy, right? Whether that's independent or whether that's with an actual publisher.
Now, with that, would you say that's when your writing stopped being about the story and started becoming about what people would be expectations that way? And then a little follow-up with that, did you find, now that you finally crossed that publishing barrier, did it improve, or was it as good as you thought it would be, or was it like, oh, I don't know if I like this?
It scared the hell out of me. If I'm totally honest, it was one of those things that I looked at my series. So Outland Stars is really written. I struggle with this. People sometimes say like, you shouldn't mash up a bunch of stuff and throw it into one book, but that's always what a book is, right? It's a mashup of different things. I love Star Wars, grew up on Star Wars. Every Christmas was Millennium Falcon and Han Solo and, whatever the toys were that year. So Star Wars was really my first love. When Firefly came out, I loved the fact that it was like set in the Old West, kind of had this Old West feel to it. Grew up watching a ton of like Western movies with uncles and dads and grandpas and the whole thing. And so I love those two things. And Star Wars is a very lived-in universe, right? So I knew that I wanted my series to be something like that. I wanted to have some elements from both of those things in it, and also some military science fiction. I read a ton of military science fiction. So when you throw all those things together, what do you end up with? And I thought, well, I'm a student of history, love history. So I thought, what if we could set something in like the American Civil or American Revolution, but instead of being a colony on a different continent, it's on a different planet, and America lost, right? So at some point America loses, right? So all of those things led me to where I wanted to like this is the series I want to make. And I thought I got time to make this. I can spend a year coming up with ideas and doing all this stuff and figuring all this out. And I had a pretty good outline on where I wanted to go. But as soon as that contract came back from Athon, to answer your question, I was like, oh, holy hell. I like, this is real now. This isn't just me with my own little universe and I get to play with all my little dolls in my head and do my thing and, all that. It's like, there's someone else has read this and said, yeah, this is good enough that actual humans want to read this. It just put it in a different perspective. And I went from, I can do whatever I want, wherever I want to make this, the story that I want to read to, well, how do I actually make this where someone else is going to want to read this, right? It really reinforced that to me and made me think about, this is ultimately, this needs to be a commercial success, not just a vanity project for me that I ultimately want to read myself. And so it did change a little bit. Like it made me go back through and look at every one of my key points in my outline and be like, does this meet market, right? Does this actually hit where it needs to be? Because there were a few things where I was like, this is cool, but it's cool for cool's sake. It doesn't necessarily push the story forward. It's the Tom Bombadil, right? It's the like, this is a great side quest, but it ultimately doesn't feed the story, right? So as an indie, I probably would have left that in there, and wrongly so. I would have been like, hey, I'm a new author. I can get away with making some mistakes and doing some things. But because I'm writing this for Athon, I went back and I looked at it and I was like, you know what? I need to tighten this up a little bit. I need to fix some things here. I need to, make some changes. And so I think it made me reevaluate where I was as an author and really tried to, I tried to write the absolute best story I could rather than a story that's good enough to get me to the next level.
Nice. And that actually is a great segue because Will, our veteran writer, retired soldier, so God knows you're used to criticism and being critiqued and all that constantly. What were your takeaways from being an indie author to becoming a published author through a publishing company about the takeaways of feedback, criticism, and as well as the doubt in your writing? Because the big takeaway from this episode, I just want to remind people, is everybody has doubts. Everybody's questioning what they're writing, especially if you're trying to get published. You're also starting to think, well, 8 million people think the same way, or will they laugh at you, what have you. So my big takeaway is just from our stories is that you trust your writing at the end of the day. So Monsieur Will, please.
Goes back to when I was a kid. My older brother, got me into reading. He would read me tales of Robin Hood and Ivanhoe and fantasy. And that I remember as a kid being, before my reading level was decent enough to pick up a novel and read it, I would just be dazzled by all these awesome book covers on his bookshelf, And that inspired me to be a storyteller. When I was a kid, I would write tiny little stories, that kind of thing. Nothing big, and then I grew out of it as life gets more complex as you grow up, and I ended up in the military, and I was completely bored one day in the Kuwaiti desert with nothing better to do. Was New Year's, for if anyone remembers Y2K, what they were doing when 1999 turned to 2000. Well, I was in a tent in Kuwait in the middle of the desert. So that's what I was doing. And I picked up a copy of Robert Heinlein's Starship Troopers. And I'm sitting there like, okay, well, I like the movie. Surely this, some people say they like the book better. I read it and I was blown away, and I was like, this is nothing like the movie. Nothing. It was gritty. It was raw. It was controversial. It brought out both the good and the bad, and it was politically charged, and I was completely blown away by it. So fast forward a few years later when the Xbox came out, I tried this little game called Halo. And at the time, I had no idea it was going to be this huge phenomenon. And I found myself being obsessed with the lore of it. And then I happened to be in a bookstore in Wichita Falls, Texas. I drove down there from Fort Sill, Oklahoma, where I was at the time. And I just happened to find a Halo book by Eric Nyland, who is an amazing writer. And it was The Fall of Reach. That was the name of the book. And I read that and I was completely floored. And I immediately tried to write something. And I immediately realized I didn't know what I was doing. And then I kind of, years later, I came across a Facebook ad. And if you're not familiar with M.D. Cooper's books are amazing. They're space opera. And so I just saw this ad and I was like, 99 cents. Why not? Click. I couldn't put it down. And I was so impressed by this book. I found M.D. Cooper on Facebook and sent a message. Next thing you know, I get a response. And one thing led to another. And I was completely inspired to write my own. And that's when I came up with concept for my first trilogy, which was horrible. Well, no, it was a great story. It was a great story, great characters, poor execution. I didn't know what I was doing.
If you don't mind, well, I was just what you just said there brought another question right up to mind. How do you separate the useful criticism from the criticism that would fundamentally change your stories when you were doing that?
I ignore criticism that I can't do anything about. If it's something that I can take action on and it's within my capability to do so, then I'll pay attention to it. But if it's something I can't get past, like some kind of barrier, whether it's my own criticism is worse than anybody else's, and that actually was a driving force to get better. Because I was like, if I'm not happy with it, then the readers aren't going to be happy with it. I've got to do better. And
so with doing that, then when did you? Because like you said, because you've said this a lot before that your first books were horrible, blah 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 blah. I highly doubt they're that bad because you're a pretty damn good writer. But how do you separate? Sorry, at what point did you decide that the way you're writing now is where you need to be, or have you got to that point that you feel where you are now is where you need to be? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, sure. So 2017, 2018 was when that trilogy came out. Fast forward to 2024 when I got back into writing. The latter part of my military career, the higher, this, Gary, the higher rank you are, the more responsibilities you have and the less free time you have. So it wasn't very conducive being a senior non-commissioned officer and being an author at the same time, not on active duty. It just wasn't going to work. So when I retired in 2022. I went through counseling and, all kinds of stuff to help me transition to the civilian world. And it was a rough transition. And finally, it dawned on me early 2024. I was like, I've got this great idea for a story. I've already learned so many hard lessons. I've already learned what not to do. So let's apply what I've learned and put it into something new. And that's when my Blood and Metal series was born. And did it fly off the shelves and become a New York Times best-selling series? No. But was it was it a failure? Also no. Even though I didn't have the marketing acumen to really propel it to the next level, like as if I published through Athon and they have all the tools and the support. I didn't have any of that. And yeah, I learned a lot of hard lessons when it came to marketing and covers and blah blah blah. But it didn't do it didn't do poorly, and the read through rate. It's a 7-book series, and the read through rate is actually pretty impressively high. Most people, that the majority of people that read the first book will read the second, and once they move on to the second, I have a very high read through rate.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I knew
quite
I
an
was.
accomplishment there too.
That's when I knew I was doing something right. And then I got cocky. And then I came out with a follow-on series. And I didn't really rehash Bad Move, but I didn't put enough emphasis into the magic that I had captured with that first series. I feel like I let myself down with the second series, and it didn't do nearly as well.
Did you get
And
feedback on that from anybody, like from reviews or fellow
no,
authors?
that was the frustrating part. I really needed a professional look at my stuff, put me in the right direction, and that's when I, ended up meeting Brent in the Military Science Fiction Podcast Discord group, and I watched a lot of their stuff, and I did a lot of research. I had a huge come to Jesus moments where I was like, you have learned all these lessons and you have made all these bad decisions. It's time to stop making excuses and write on that next level, because you can do it. You have the tools, you've been there, done that. All you need is a professional to be like an independent critic, you know? What I needed was a professional editor or somebody who understood the market. And I was like, if I can just come up with a book or a series or a trilogy that's written to market, hits all the beats, has all the tropes, is fun to read, is concise, no fluff, no filler,
Absolutely.
with a good flow, then that's something that I knew I could pull off. And that's how I developed the Nomad series. And I had most of the first book written by the time I submitted it. Athon submission process, they want the first 50 pages. So I submitted a file with 50 pages on there, and I didn't think I was going to hear back from them. And about 3-4 weeks later, I get an email, and they're just like, we want to see more of this. So I was like, okay. So I had just happened to finish the entire book. So I submitted the whole thing, and they came right back. We love where this is heading. We want to publish this. I was floored. And turns out that series actually did pretty well. And here I am today as a testament that you can succeed if you can just not quit. Quitting is the only guaranteed way to.
So almost you'd say your own feedback to your own writing was better than a lot of the noise you were hearing about your writing beforehand. Just
Yeah,
pushing through and just teaching yourself and forcing yourself to question and keep building your skill set.
learning across the way, and reading helps.
Yeah.
What I would recommend to any author is if you want to succeed in a particular genre, then find the books in that genre, not necessarily the latest and greatest that just came out, because oftentimes a book will hit big at first and then slide off. You want to look at the ones that on the in the top 10 that have tons of reviews and that have that sticking power. Those are the ones you want to home in on and check out.
Even the
And read.
classics would help you as well.
What's that?
Even reading some of the classics as well.
Classics are great, mainly because of the language and the iambic pentameter of it all. There was a point in time where the written word was truly an art form. Nowadays, it still is, but it's changed formats so much. These new genres coming around, I think, and Amazon actually has a lot to do with it because there are a lot of genres now that succeed that would not have existed when it was an
Mhm.
all traditional publishing format. So there are a lot of voices out there and a lot of new genres and subgenres. Like military science fiction was never really, it kind of existed in the abstract, but it never really existed as a true marketable category of books. Like you go into a
You
Barnes
had
and
to dig to
Noble,
find it, right? Like, you had to really dig to find it?
yeah, you
Well,
had
a
to
lot
think
of
to
people
find it.
also thought Star
What?
Trek was a military science fiction because they had these ships with lasers. Well, that must be a military science fiction. I guess in the smallest detail, sure, but not really. You're not really sending
Right.
officers off a ship every time something bad happens, and everybody else is just back on there hoping you make it back to command them to get home. So,
Yeah, Star Trek is very egalitarian, whereas, Star Wars had a grittier feel. Now, Star Wars is, just so the audience knows, it's more space fantasy than science fiction. It's science fiction, but it's more space fantasy. I mean, you have space wizards with laser swords.
you'd fall under the space opera category.
Yeah, in a modern construct, it would be a space opera that kind of goes the fantastic route versus the hard science fiction route. Whereas Star Trek was always the harder science fiction.
Do
Uh,
you guys remember finding Hammer Slammers for the first time? Do you guys ever
Hammer
read that?
Slammers, no, 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 no. Hammer Slammers. I don't remember reading it, but I have read it.
Yeah, I remember finding that on the shelf, right? You talk about hard to find Mill SF, and I remember, like, you're going through the section of Walden Books or whatever it was, or the independent bookstore,
Now
and
you're
I
bringing
remember
me way
going through
back.
and finding Hammer Slammers. You pull this out and it's like, there's a flying tank on the front of this book. How can I not read this, right? And that's one of those things that, like, got me into Mill SF, right? But it was a hunt to find good Mill SF for a long time.
I
Hmm.
find with Mill SF2, I find what's brought its quality up is the fact that one, it's still quite a small niche, but it's got a large fan base. It's also got a large variety of writers who bring various either service related experience or wish they would have had that kind of service related inside the book for realism. So, like I was mentioning with Star Trek, when the captain and everybody beams down and there's literally no one left running the asylum, you know, you almost forget about that trope. Where with the mill sci-fi, you have your command elements, yes, but then it's more focusing on that smaller element going to deal with the problem, usually with the assistance of a command structure and different like Air Force, Marines, what have you. And for those who have always been fascinated by war and movies of war and science fiction, what a wonderful world military science fiction has become for that.
Yeah.
And the tropes are very simple to follow. Like they're there, but they're also to a point where you'll get dinged pretty quick if you try copying somebody else's tropes. So I do love how it goes into originality. Now, Will, with that being said, you've written several trilogies. You've written several different, very different trilogies, not just the similar story going on to a different universe. How much trial and error does it take yourself to trust what you're writing and what you're spending that time on? And it's a considerable amount of time that's going to be something that could be published. Because now as a published author, I know that's your goal, is to continuously publish work. So
Yeah, and
how
more
is
specifically, work that is commercially viable.
right. So now do you trust your voice more in this aspect of your writing, or are you always still going to question your voice to write to keep going?
I think there should always be a level of healthy skepticism in your own work. You should always be your harshest critic because it's never going to be perfect. There's no such thing as perfection. We don't live. We don't live long enough to reach that level of writing expertise, but we can always be better. Now, knowing that you found your voice is much different than convincing yourself that you found your voice. You have to come to that you have to come to that conclusion on your own, and nobody's there to do it for you. You have to yeah, when I got my Athon contract, it was a pretty good indication that I was in the ballpark.
Mhm.
But it wasn't until, a couple hundred reviews later, okay, people like it.
Mhm.
So that's confirmation. But I can always do better. I'm always evolving as a writer. You read my series, or at least the first couple books. It's grittier than your typical, and I try to crank that up to the 211 with my new trilogy. That, as a matter of fact, I just hit 100,000 words on book 3, and
Congratulations.
I'm about to start on the epilogue, and that'll be it.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
Man.
But it's been a grind because I'm working with a whole new voice. I'm trying to make things even more concise, even more gritty, even more fluff free, to where what you're getting is really the meat and potatoes framework of a fast paced story. And that was my ultimate objective. And so my current trilogy up to this point is really my magnum opus per se. As
I was
far
going to
as
ask, Will, do you find that your previous writing informs your current writing, right? Do you look back on what you wrote before and you're like, man, I could have tightened that up. I could have done this different. I could have whatever. And I'm going to integrate that into my next book, right?
yeah, like lessons I learned along the way, like for example, my use of humor. In other fiction genres, prolific use of humor is perfectly fine.
Mhm.
But when you're trying to be gritty and you're trying to be intense and you're trying to hold tension, and that's where military science fiction excels at, is holding tension. And whether you're a romance author or fantasy or fairies flying tanks, if you're not showing action, you have to build and or maintain tension. And comedy or humor can break that tension if you don't do it right.
It's got to be gallows humor, unfortunately, sometimes to keep that going.
Yeah, well, realistically, like you said, gallows humor, or as we like to just say, humor in the Army.
Is there another kind?
Nah, it's being in the military. If you've never been in the military and you just see soldiers marching on parade or soldiers in combat or airplanes flying around, you don't realize how dark and twisted those people really are, because they have a very, very rough job. A very, very, and they're putting their lives on the line. So you have that darkness feeding into the humor. So if you can capture that dark humor and use it sparingly, and just put it where it needs to be without breaking up the tension. That was where I was feeling before. A lot of my books have a lot of humor. My I Space Work trilogy is objectively hilarious, but it was also a borderline vanity project because I knew I was out of bounds with genre and marketing, and it was a pain in the butt to market. Trust me. Because yeah, it's military science fiction, but the title is I Space Orc. And newsflash, the space orcs are actually the humans. And that's where it confuses people, even though I even put my own stinking face on the cover just to show, hey, there are no aliens here. Well, there are aliens in the book, but like I said, that one was funny and it was written in the first person and it actually sells pretty decently, but it was never going to go more than 3 books, and it was always going to be a vanity project, and I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
But I'm a funny person, and I like to put humor in stuff, and for me, it was an outlet. Whereas my current work, yeah, there's going to be some jokes in there. There's going to be some things that are hilarious, but they're going to be timed or inserted in the story at a certain point where it's not going to be a distractor. And
Right.
that's just an example of the many things I've had to learn along the way.
That's awesome.
Gary, I noticed your first book. There's a lot of humor back and forth between your AI character and your main character, and how they just kind of bounce off one another. And those are things that I think very much come out of probably previous experience, right? Like exactly what Will was talking about, where like you know, that's just the day-to-day interactions of being in a military organization or paramilitary organization.
It
How does
is.
that, how much of that came out of like your real life experience versus how much were you trying to like write to market with that?
Well, I mean, you've talked to me.
Yeah.
How different, how, like, that's how I talk. Like, I, I've always found, especially in the military, right? Like, even if you've never seen anything horrible, you're trained to see something horrible. And we love to separate those who have and those who haven't and all this and that. But at the end of the day, everybody has the same fundamental training that wherever you go, you must be prepared to do what most people can't. God, what a weight that is on your shoulder, right? Why not? How about you have to have fun with it? You have like the gallows humor, the dark humor. And as Will just said, that's just humor in the military. Because if you're not laughing and joking with your buddies constantly and having a good time, when times are tough, that trust isn't there, that loyalty isn't there, that the respect isn't there. It's the camaraderie. I think that's what everybody misses when they leave the military, the police forces, the first responders, and everything. You have a different relationship. Like it's funny. I was actually having a talk with my buddy earlier. He's like, he's retired, and I was asking how it's going, and he's like, it's weird. Like nobody ever goes, oh yeah, retirement's great, uniform's gone, stuff like that. He's like, but he then says like Canada's really starting to toughen up now when you have to show ID to get onto our bases. I know, pretty high end. We're
Wait,
leading. So
what?
yeah, we don't have guards like you guys do or anything. You go into a little booth, you hand in your ID, they'll give you a card, you go. And he's like, and then he's like, the juice isn't worth the squeeze to even do that, to go onto the base, to go to the museums or go to the mess to have a beer with other people, stuff like that. And he goes, and that's the thing he finds hard is like when you get out of the military, your outlets are gone. Because I can tell you right now, if I started talking like I would to Scott or to like you guys at the grocery store, I'd probably be asked to leave. You know what I mean? And it's just having fun dealing with all the nerves and stuff like that. Like for Gary personally, my outlet was self-deprivation.
Mm-hmm.
I made fun of myself constantly, like especially with when I gained weight. Be like, if I have another piece of pizza, I'll have my own gravitational pull. It's even a bit darker. If I couldn't hang myself from that tree because the branch would break. And
If I
most
get
people
any
would be like,
bigger than household items will be in orbit around me.
but see, you guys didn't even flinch when I said that stuff. But I've actually had newer people, like privates, when I was in, complain they found that offensive.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So where did that put me after I retired? I was in the whole therapy stuff and everything, and I got lost in books. TV's all the same now, stuff like that. So, and Audible was my thing because just I'm too old to read. I fall asleep. So 600 some odd titles later, my therapist, Enzia, she's like, have you tried writing? I'm like, never in a million years did I think I would write. She goes, well, why don't you try like a nice outlet? And wasn't she right? So I started writing, and I started writing about things that I wish I saw in books: more action, more space battles. That guy's about to get rescued, and he doesn't. And dealing with those emotions and that creativity, and just opening my mind to the point where it probably took me about 3 months of like research, studying, YouTubing, and then just started to write. And I remember I wrote 5 chapters, and I sent them to a buddy of mine. He said, should I even bother? And he goes, man, I love this, especially what you were talking about, how the internet and climate, because I feel like a lot of stuff I've read that really could happen. So I finished the book, and like you guys, I was like, well, for giggles and poops, I'm going to send the first 50 pages into Athon. And the next day, boom, we want the rest of the book. Okay, this isn't terrifying. I send them the book. But a week or so goes by. Remember, I was like, I was playing Xbox, as a retired guy would do on a beautiful Tuesday morning. And all of a sudden I checked my email, and it's an offer. from Athon. And I had to call my wife down because I didn't believe it. I'm like, is this what I think it is? You know, so all of a sudden I'm like, okay, I'm now an author, which compared to yourselves, my experience is not there. So me trusting my voice took longer. Even though I was writing books and stuff like that and got another deal, I still wasn't trusting my voice because in my last job, the intelligence world, you're trained to write everything quick, clean, and precise. You know what I mean? So my writing was clean and precise, and I'd edit it, edit it, edit it, edit it. Because one thing, I don't know about your military, but in the Canadian military, you send something in to get, we call it QC, quality controlled, comes back red pen to death. You do the corrections, you send it back, comes back more red pens. Send it back, and then goes to a different person, goes through all this and that. By the time you get it back, it's the same damn product you originally gave it. You know, some corrections, obviously. So everybody has what I learned from that and realizing in my writing is everybody's going to have a comment. This is the downside for the stars and the reviews on Amazon, because people are going to like it, people are not going to like it, or people are just going to say, I don't care, you know, whatever. So for me, trusting my voice would be over editing. I used AI to edit. I used a thesaurus to edit. I used dictionaries to edit. I used friends to edit. And then I had to just stop and go, no, just write your damn story, you know? So like the book 3 is now zero AI edit helping. It's just my voice, a thesaurus. I'll use Pro Writing Aid. But other than that, I'm keeping my voice mine and not letting anything interfere with my authorship of my books. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Gary,
Perfect
have you noticed that I struggle with this because I was a part of a couple different writing groups fairly early on, and none of the other people in those writing groups wrote science fiction or military science fiction.
No.
There was like romance authors, and there was horror authors, and there were, you know, guys who wrote Christian, you know, a little, you know, doily hat, you know, Christian fiction stuff, women. And
I'm sorry, I'm just trying to rack my brain.
I know, I'm thinking like that was just not a guy thing. I mean, most guys aren't writing that. But I noticed that early on, I would take their comments to heart, and I'd be like, oh crap, there's too much violence in this. I have to change this. I have to fix this. I have to do whatever. And eventually I'm like, this is not my audience. This is not who I'm writing to. So if I'm taking all of these elements to heart and saying, well, I need to fix this, you know, violent encounter that happens, it's military science fiction. It's meant to have violent encounters. That person's never going to buy my book. I need to weigh, you know, put some weight on some of these things. Do you guys find yourselves doing the same thing where it's like you had to at some point bring back your expectations to my voice counts, and I have to kick this out to the market that I want it to be in?
Absolutely, and it still didn't work at first. So the friend who I originally gave my first 5 chapters to, and he's a very smart man, smarter than I am, degrees, executive level work, all this and that. He's like, this is great. I'm enjoying it. Awesome. And I still felt I needed to critique it more. I still felt, you know what I mean? The problem with the military sci-fi world, especially when you're writing and you give it to your friends, I knew Eric, he was honest, 100%. But I knew there was a couple of friends I couldn't give it to because they'd tell me it was great, even if it was the biggest piece of garbage on the planet. You know what I mean? And that's the problem. Like you said, with military science fiction, it's a small genre. Like my mom bought my book. She's not reading it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And not because she doesn't want to read it. She's trying, but like my bad guys are called the Zenthari. And she's like, well, how do you pronounce that? And so it's like, I love the fact that my mom's trying to read my book. Don't get me wrong. And that's probably one of the most proudest things you could ever have.
Sure.
As a child. But I also know that who I'm actually writing for is smaller than who's actually had my book, you know? And when you write a book, be prepared. People are going to write it or read your book either because they know you and want you to succeed, know you and want you to fail, and don't know you and looking for something different to read. And the people who don't know you and looking for something different to read are the people you're actually writing to. And that was my lesson I had to learn. I was writing for people who knew me and would be reading my book hoping they liked it. when they will or they won't. You know what I mean? So the finding your voice part is a hard lesson to learn, but when you learn it, my next series I'll be writing after Project Threshold, I'm even more excited about now because my brain's just been brainstorming nonstop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good stuff. And it's, I've noticed that as I started writing there are authors that I want to write like, that there are certain people that I'm like, they knock it out of the park. I love the way that Nick Cole writes and takes an object and he looks at it from 7 different points of view, right? And
Right.
but that's not me, and I don't really write that way, right? So I can take that
Or,
and I can be like, well, how do I apply Brent Gaskey to the way that Nick Cole writes, right? And
or even how do you bring yourself to write the volume that Rick Partlow writes?
precisely, yeah,
You know what I mean? It's like, and then like, and because I'm still a big reader, a Megaforce.
yeah, yeah.
Right. I'm currently on chapter 10 of Kill Shot on that story. And Joshua Giselle's an amazing writer. And what I find when I'm listening to these books or reading these books is I'm not that good.
Yeah,
How come I
yeah,
can't write like that?
absolutely. But you know what? I found myself going back and reading passages from, not as an editor, not as a writer, but as a reader, going back and reading some passages from my books and being like, damn, that's good. Like that's, not maybe Dalzell good, but it's good enough that I enjoyed it, right? Like if one of you guys would have wrote it, I would have been like, that's solid writing. Like that's really good. But then I
And that
look
was
at it
my next
myself and I'm
point.
like, oh, that was me. I can't say that I like my own stuff.
But that was my next point, Brent, is I've said the same thing about your books, Will, and I said the same thing about your book, Brent. Like, man, I wish I could write like that. Man, I wish I could get my point across. And then guess what? I'm like, well, how did he do that? And you start, and then how do I put that in my voice? How do I make that mine where I'm not stealing, but I'm learning, right? Because everybody's learning from everybody. And if you're stealing stuff from another author, you're going to get caught pretty damn fast. Unless you read some of those authors that blatantly just steal everything. But but anyways, I digress. But yeah, so finding your voice, I think, also brings out your creativity more. And I think like Will's the picture perfect example of that, putting you on a pedestal here, buddy, is did the indie stuff, did all this stuff, and then get this series published and still wasn't happy with that and still knowing they can do better. And Will, you're out of the three of us, you have like we're a step here on this group, which is why I love this podcast and knowing you guys. All three of us write differently. All three of us are in different stages of our careers, but the three of us love this genre and we love what we do. And we love the fact that we can talk about it and be nerds. And how lucky are we, right?
Yeah, yeah. Which actually, the intent was for me to give this really cool tip at the end of every show. And to be honest, the best tip for this show, being that we're on topic, is to be confident with your voice. Like, don't let anyone distract you from it. Stick to it and work on it yourself because nobody else is going to do it. You have to put in the work to do it. Find your voice, get it genre specific, and then let the professionals give you the critiques. Don't worry about your friends. Well, here's a bonus tip for you. Unlike what Gary did, where his mom wrote his book, if you are an indie author,
My mom didn't write my book.
no, read.
Read.
Yeah.
Your mom wrote your book.
Yeah, your mom wrote your book. No, if you're don't get your friends and family to read your stuff when it comes out because you want the algorithm to get those organic people that are looking for your genre to do it because you'll confuse the algorithm. You want somebody that has a track record of reading science fiction being the one buying your science fiction because that feeds the algorithm. So that's what I did. I didn't try to say, hey, quickly read my book and give me a review. I need reviews. No, all that is done. I let it happen organically because you want the algorithm to be fed. Feed the algorithm. That is my wisdom.
That is awesome wisdom. And also don't take the reviews like too hard. Like not everybody's gonna like what you write.
You're
Not
always going to get torpedoed by a bad review.
always.
Yeah, because the book cover was a quarter-inch sideways, so they're gonna leave you a 1-star review because the
Oh,
mailman screwed up, delivered it to your house or something.
Or if you
or
put your
even
own
getting
face on the cover.
yeah, but even if you get a 2-star review and no reason why, that's just the way it goes. But
Mhm.
remember, if you're at that point where your book, you've written your book, publisher has taken that book and put it out there for you, and you're reading a review, whether it's a positive or negative review, remember, you're reading a review on your book that's in competition with millions, like literally, what, 4 million books in Kindle alone? You know,
Well,
if
probably
you're like,
closer to 40 million.
so if you're like, oh, well, you're only 150,000, your book's at 157,000 in Kindle. Yeah, that's out of millions. Like, those are wins. Like that's when you know you're doing it for yourself, and if you make money at it, great, but you're out there and you're telling your story.
But on Amazon,
That's
you're competing against the big authors too.
yeah. And with that, we have to send a special nod to Jeff Haskell.
Yes. Our friend Jeff, he just had a heart attack and he's recovering, and we're all praying for him. But yeah, they put a stent in him. But Jeffrey Haskell, is an amazing military science fiction author. He's at the pinnacle. He's in the top 1%, but he's also an all around great guy. So we're hoping for the best for his recovery.
Because when you hear us talk about the Mill SF podcast and stuff like that, that's Jeffrey Haskell, that's Rick Partlow, that's James Aaron. And realistically, that group brought us together. So we're really praying for Jeffrey and his family, because just doing what he does has brought life to us as well.
Yeah, it's so cool to see. Those guys have done an exceptional job of assisting and bringing new authors into the genre, right? And it would be easy for them to say, "Well, I don't want competition to come in," right? But they're much more of the opinion that a rising tide raises all boats, right? And just the assistance and the help that we've got from those guys has been amazing. And we the three of us are in kind of a unique position that we're all fairly freshly retired from our service. And I don't necessarily put food on the table with the money that's coming in from my book sales. Some of the guys that are on that other side of the podcast, they are, right. So it would be great if people went out there and read the Grimm's War series. It's exceptional military science fiction, and just science fiction in general. It's a fun read. So yeah, if you want to go out there and if you're looking for a new series or something to do, Jeff's series is well worthwhile to pick up.
But at the very least, just put out a positive vibe for this guy, because he's a good man, good father, good husband, and we wish him the speediest of recoveries.
Yeah, good deal. Anything else today, gentlemen?
No, I think we're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we got a special guest coming up in a couple of weeks. Is that right?
Yeah, we
That's
have
right.
Deontay Black coming on not next week, the week after, who is the narrator of Will's books, and he's also the narrator of my book. So
exciting stuff. So, yeah, getting into that Audible side of things, I think it's going to be a really cool audio, not audible side of things. Will be really interesting. And I love kind of hearing about all the different portions of what it takes to actually, write a good series and write a good book. And that's definitely a bigger portion than it used to be is the audio side of that. So, okay, with that, go ahead, Ben.
Oh no, I couldn't agree more, man. I'm looking forward to learning more about that process of how somebody takes somebody else's book and then turns it into a single person performance to release it out there. I'm looking forward to that episode for sure.
Good. All right. Well, with that, we'll catch you guys next week. Thank you so much for being here, and do that like and subscribe and all the other doodly do stuff down in the comments. So thanks, y'all.